Files, we tell the story of a group of French, Italian, American and Brazilian racing drivers. Maurice Trintignant, Harry Schell, Eugenio Castellotti, Luigi Musso and Nano da Silva Ramos, who all added to the colour and excitement of Grand Prix and sports car racing in the 1950s. Frenchman Maurice Trintignant was born in 1917 and began racing in 1938. He was the youngest of 5 brothers, the eldest of whom, Louis, had been killed in 1933 driving a Bugatti. Although the family sold the car, the younger Trintignant bought it back and raced it before and after the Second World War. He was lucky to recover from an enormous crash in a support race to the 1948 Swiss Grand Prix. In a coma for 8 days and pronounced dead, he was nursed back to health and returned to racing with French Marc Gordini the following year. He had success in non-championship races, but only scored 2 points in the World Championship until 1954. That year, Trintignant made a bold decision, leaving Gordini and joining Ferrari. He was second in the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa and third in the German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring. In addition, he won the 1954 Le Mans 24-hour, sharing a Ferrari with Froilan Gonzalez. And there were more top 6 places during the 1954 Grand Prix season. In 1955, he managed the unusual feat of sharing both second and third places in Argentina, achieved by swapping cars, which was possible in those days. A highlight was winning the Monaco Grand Prix for Ferrari. All the Mercedes drivers retired, and Alberto Ascari crashed his Lancia into the sea, but nevertheless it was a steady drive to victory for Trintignant. However, Trintignant's successes didn't satisfy him, so at the end of 1955 he left Ferrari to join Van Wall. The British team was still developing its cars and Trintignant wasn't able to finish a race. He was equally disappointed with a one-off drive in the last racing Bugatti at Reims in the 1956 French Grand Prix. There was the occasional drive for Ferrari in 1957. He scored a 5th at Monaco and a 4th at Aintree in the British Grand Prix, sharing the car with Peter Collins. In 1958, at 40 years of age, Maurice Trintignant won the Monaco Grand Prix again, this time in the Rob Walker Cooper. He made the change to rear-engined cars with ease. He was third behind Roy Salvadori and Tony Brooks in the German Grand Prix at Aarhus in Berlin. Maurice was 4th in the 1955 championship, 7th in 58 and 5th after a very competitive year in 59, scoring in 5 races, including a 2nd place in the US Grand Prix at Sebring. 1959 also brought him a 2nd place as part of the Aston Martin team at Le Mans. He was popular with his fellow drivers and the crowds. He replaced Stirling Moss in 1962 after Stirling's Spa crash and drove for various team managers including Reg Parnell and Rob Walker. In his last year of competition, Trintignant ran his own team with a BRM V8 and scored his final World Championship point, aged 47, in the 1964 German Grand Prix. His last race was at Le Mans with a GT40. After his retirement, he returned to a quiet life as a wine grower in a small town close to Nîmes in France. In his later years, Trintignant became the mayor of the town, and he died in February 2005 at the age of 87. Franco-Brazilian Hermano Nano da Silva Ramos raced in Grand Prix and sports car races in the 1950s.
I drove for several years for Gordini, and he was a very nice man, so I was very faithful to him. But in fact, the cars, as you know, were not that fast and that reliable, so I didn't have too many successes with him. And then I drive for Maserati, the day Maserati, you know, of Formula One, for 4 or 5 races. And then, you know, I retired by the end of 59 when I was in the Ferrari team for the sports team.
Another interesting driver of the time was French-born American Harry Schell. He
was born in France. His mother was American. Then they went to America before the war, and they were caught by the war in America. And I think his mother had all of her cars with her. You know, she had a team of racing cars, and they were caught in America during the war, and they started racing there. And then he joined the American Army, and he came back to France after the war, and he started racing in Europe.
Harry's wealthy mother Lucy had her own racing team, Écurie Bleue, in the 1930s and 40s. Her money had come from her father, who built the New York subway. Harry started racing in 1949. Great determination saw this 6-foot 4-inch driver squeeze himself into a 500 Cooper or a 4.5-litre Talbot. He even competed at Monaco in a Cooper in 1100cc form. He crashed, but in his second World Championship race, the Swiss Grand Prix, he tried the big Talbot, a very different sort of car. He finished in 8th place. Over the next 4 years, Harry Schell raced mainly in Maseratis. He was 6th in the Argentine Grand Prix in both 1954 and 55. In non-championship races, he was more competitive and more successful. Harry lived in Paris and ran a bar, the Action Automobile, frequented by Nana da Silva and a Spanish nobleman, Alfonso de Portago.
Well, he had the Action Automobile bar, which was in close to the Étoile, and was a place where we all gathered together for a drink every day. That was the place where we all decided to what we were doing for the next week and what was going on. It was a very nice bar.
Harry Schell joined Van Wall at the end of 1955. There were many retirements and only one 4th place at Spa to show for it. It was an important move for his career, and he drove hard, particularly against the Ferraris at Reims in the 1956 French Grand Prix. When English drivers Sterling Moss and Tony Brooks arrived at Van Wall in 1957, Schell rejoined Maserati, partnering Juan Manuel Fangio. He finished in the points 4 times, with a 3rd in Pescara in Italy and a 4th in Argentina. There were also some effective sports car performances, but he was lucky to escape injury when his Maserati caught fire in Caracas in Venezuela at the end of the year. In 1958, Harry and Frenchman Jean Béra joined BRM. Béra won with the front-engine P25 in Cannes when Harry retired, and they finished 1st and 2nd in the International Trophy at Silverstone against poor opposition at the end of the season. BRM provided Schell with his best ever Grand Prix results, scoring on no less than 7 occasions in the championship. There was a fine 2nd at Zandvoort in the Dutch Grand Prix, and at Silverstone he fought hard for 5th place in the British Grand Prix. While Béra moved on, Harry stayed at BRM for 1959. The car, however, was not as competitive. Harry was a larger-than-life character, but he now had racing experience to back it up. At 39 years of age, Harry Schell could have been considered a late developer, but at the peak of his driving career. When British Racing Partnership invited him to join their team and become their #1 driver, they knew that he would be an asset and that he had ambition. He'd already shown that he could handle the new breed of rear-engined cars with his own Cooper in Formula 2 races. The non-championship events appeared to underline his potential, but on May the 13th, 1960, practicing for the International Trophy at Silverstone, Harry Schell was killed. On a wet track at Abbey Curve, he lost control and banged his head, breaking his neck. Bruce Halford was a Formula One privateer at the time.
Harry Schell was terrific. a real funster. Regrettably, he got killed just in front of me.
He was a better driver than people gave him credit for.
So. I think he was. But you don't... I mean, this is what I think all we old farts here think back on. We had fun, and there were characters. I'm not at all sure that there are anymore.
He was always having fun, always joking with everybody, and everybody loved him. And he was a good driver too, and he, you know, Fon Portago, I raced with Fon Portago and Harry at Silverstone, and he was a very good friend of Fon Portago, who died in the Mille Miglia crash, as you may remember, and was a very good driver and very good at bobsleigh, at horse riding in the Liverpool Grand Steeple. And once we drove at Silverstone together, and he had a Ferrari, not a works Ferrari, but his own Ferrari that he bought, a Formula One Ferrari, and he was faster than my Gordini on the straight, but I would catch him on braking. And I remember that on the last lap, he didn't want to brake to be ahead of me at the finish line, and he went off the road and broke his leg. And with Harry, we took him back to Paris, and when we arrived in Paris, his apartment was empty because his wife, she was American, had left with the 2 kids, and she went back to America.
In 1955, Nino Farina announced his retirement, and Alberto Ascari died. Who would be the next great Italian racing drivers? 2 talents emerged: Eugenio Castellotti and Luigi Musso. Both blossomed, but neither really bloomed. The younger of the two was Castellotti. He was a country gentleman from the town of Lodi, not far from Milan, and was encouraged by a local sponsor from the age of 20, buying a Ferrari sports car. He finished second at Monaco in 1952 in the sports car race, and this encouraged Lancia to sign him up to drive their new Formula One car in 1954. He also finished fourth in the Mexican Carrera Panamericana long-distance road race in 1953. The 54 season promised a great deal for the young driver. The Vittorio Jano designed D50 Lancia was late arriving, and so 1954 saw Castellotti have a few sports car drives but little else. He did a lot of testing, however, and in 1955, in a handful of races, he was recognized as a coming man. Second place at Monaco in 1955 to Maurice Trintignant underlined his own confidence. Ascari died at Monza, driving Castellotti's car, wearing Castellotti's helmet. Not surprisingly, Eugenio was one of the pallbearers at Alberto's funeral in Milan on the 28th of May. With Ascari's death and Villaresi's retirement, Castellotti was Lancia's only driver at Spa, where he took pole position but retired from the race. Within 2 weeks, financially troubled Lancia was sold to Fiat, and the racing team was taken over by Ferrari. With more drivers than cars at Ferrari, Castellotti concentrated on sports cars, winning the Sebring 12 Hours. 1961 world champion Phil Hill was on the fringes of Ferrari at that time.
I never knew him well because he was already well established when I came along as a very junior driver. But he was a very fine driver. I remember at Le Mans in 1955, the first time I drove an official Ferrari car. I had driven a number of years private cars. I had a car of my own, a 212, that had been involved in a fatal accident at Le Mans, and I bought from Luigi Canetti the thing and fixed it up and repaired it and ran it at home. But I remember, and Castellotti had a car like that. But when I got to driving at Le Mans in 1955, I remember very well following behind in one of those 121 LMs, those inline sixes that Ferrari had 3 of that year. And I considered it was a great pride for me to be able to stay on his tail there for a couple of laps, because he was the #1 guy on the team, and I had great admiration for him.
I was very fortunate because when before I joined Ferrari, I used to drive for Lotus, as you know, and Castellotti and Musso before they joined Ferrari, were with Oscar. And I used to race against them several times with the Lotus.
In 1956, Castellotti won the Mille Miglia for Ferrari in atrocious weather conditions. Friction in the team had already begun to develop between Luigi Musso and Castellotti, who was dogged with unreliability during the season. He scored a fourth place at Monaco when he took over Fangio's discarded car, and in the French Grand Prix at Reims, he fought it out with teammate Peter Collins all the way. In the end, the Englishman won. Reliability problems saw him fail to finish in the points for the rest of the year. He wasn't helped by a fierce duel with Musso during the early stages of the Italian Grand Prix, when both cars had mechanical problems. The rivalry with Musso and a love affair with Delia Scala, a great Italian opera singer, saw his private life becoming public knowledge. As the pressure was building, he went on holiday to Florence, but Enzo Ferrari called him back to Maranello. Jean Beira had broken the lap record at the Modena circuit for Maserati, and Ferrari decided that Castellotti just had to take it back again. He crashed fatally, and the accident robbed Italy of a still developing talent before his 27th birthday.
Well, Castellotti I didn't know too well. He had a short career, but I remember him in several races like Monte Carlo, like Reims, and I remember that he was a very, as our friend Robert Manzon just said, an impatient driver, with a very, very good talent. He was a lot of charm, a very charming man, like all the drivers of the old times, but a little too ambitious maybe.
Enzo Ferrari always put pressure on his drivers, and both Castellotti and Musso were ambitious.
Absolutely. Well, you know, I have a lot of respect for Ferrari, but he always put a lot of pressure on his drivers, and he did on Castellotti, he did on Musso, he did on Peter Collins, who probably died too because of Ferrari's impatience. And that was how the old man was, and you couldn't help it, and everybody felt that pressure.
Enzo Ferrari was both loved and loathed.
Absolutely, exactly. I remember that one of the first races I drove for him, I went off the road, and he called me to Modena, and he let me wait 2 hours before he received me, and he told me, Nano, I told Farina, who was a world champion, 2 things that I'm going to tell you. First, you stay on the road. Second, you go fast. And then the next race I drove in Spa, I won in Spa, and he sent me a cable with his congratulations.
What was it like being a Ferrari driver? England's Cliff Allison drove in 1959 and the early part of 1960 for the Scuderia.
Well, I think I can't speak for personally about that, because I never got the pressure, because I joined in 59, and I had a full year racing in 59, and I was just getting going nicely in 1960, and then of course I had the accident at Monte Carlo. So I wasn't there long enough to experience the pressure myself, but I know Peter and Mike didn't. I don't think he was of a stronger character. I think he could ride over it, but it certainly affected Peter.
Luigi Musso was 6 years older than Eugenio Castellotti, and he came from a wealthy Roman family. He started with sports car races, including a class win in the Mille Miglia. More sports car events followed, but his breakthrough came with Maserati, second in the 1954 Spanish Grand Prix. He won the non-championship Pescara Grand Prix when Beira fell back with exhaust problems and Mossa retired from the lead. However, even third in the 1955 Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort and fifth behind the Mercedes team in the British Grand Prix, making him the top non-Benz driver, didn't meet his ambitions. Musso then joined Ferrari for 1956 and shared a car with Fangio to win the Argentinian Grand Prix early in the year. Then he had a crash in a sports car at the Nürburgring and broke his arm quite badly, which kept him out of racing until Monza at the end of the season. It was here that a fierce duel between Castellotti and Musso was followed by the refusal of Musso to give up his car to Fangio. Musso then had a steering arm problem and he crashed out to retirement. Peter Collins saved the day for the Argentine, handing over his car to enable Fangio to win the World Championship. With this unselfish move, Collins not only gave away the win, but gave away his chance to win the World Championship. Musso was proud, patriotic, and like most racing drivers, he had tremendous belief in his own ability. Unfortunately, he made his conceit more obvious than some, and fed by Ferrari's delight in creating rivalry within the team, he became very unpopular. Phil Hill saw this firsthand.
There was sort of a British conspiracy against Musso as far as Peter and Mike were concerned. They both sort of dug their heels in when it came to trying to beat Luigi. And, I think he was a very fine driver. At times he was brilliant. I don't think he was ever really first top line driver. But he did, like in the 500-mile race at Monza, in qualifying, he really got the bit between his teeth and did a tremendous job in that big 4.1 liter Ferrari, and got the pole position against all the Indy cars and everything. And Dan Gurney and I were standing in the infield at Monza. It was easy to do because the banking was half underground and half above, and so you could stand there and look down in the cockpit of the cars going by. And Musso just had been reading all those things that were being said about him in the Gazzetta dello Sport and all that, and just was all arms and elbows, and the car was sideways and this way and that way, all the way around. That was just a tremendous lap that he turned in there.
In 1957, Musso was the most successful of Ferrari's drivers, mainly because he wasn't as quick as the others in the fragile cars and didn't break them. Surely, World Championship success wasn't far away. We'll find out what happened to Luigi Musso in the next Auto Files.